Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We are currently in Module 9. In this lesson, we're going to be working through the planning step O, that opening up the requirements. So let's get right to the homework. So open up the requirements. Look for what is missing and figure out what is needed. Identify what can be put off for a later version. So you're going to try and eliminate all assumptions. Figure out what this application actually needs to do. In the broadest of terms, figure out how this application will work. And then once you do that, identify what things are missing, figure out, put and create two lists. One list is, these are the things that we're going to need to have to do. So we're going to need to have data storage. So we're going to put that in the list. And we'd like to have two things to store data, like two different database types. Nope, that's beyond MVP. Therefore, we're going to have one. So put one on the to-do list and the second one in the future version list. All right. We want to have a website that does all these things. That's a future version. This version, the website's going to do this. Okay. So kind of break those up into two different lists and eliminate all assumptions along the way. All right. So do that homework and then come on back. So pause the video right here. All right. I'm going to assume you did. So let's move on to planning step O. So I brought over here from planning step W our walkthrough of the application. These are the key pieces of data from the application. Now let's create a list of, let's call this things for the MVP. And we'll have a bullet list. We have over here, let's change the font size. The font size defaults to 11. Hate that. We're going to say things for a future version. And we'll have a bullet point list there as well. So we go through and talk through what assumptions we have and try and eliminate those, and then start filling in these lists. Now, assumptions, typically what you do is you write down the question and you go find the answer, because typically you aren't also the owner of this project. And by owner, I mean that you're not the one that typically commissioned the project. Now, maybe you are, especially for your first, dozen, 2 dozen projects, you probably are the person that said, I want to do this. But when you work in a company and your boss says, I want this done, your boss is probably the owner of that application, the person that can answer the assumptions. But maybe they're not. Maybe your boss was given that task by someone. You might have to send the questions through your boss, but you have to get those questions answered by the person that actually wants this application built. Because typically they'll have in their mind a picture of what they want the output to be, but they're not going to know how to say that. And so with your questions, hopefully you'll open up those areas of assumption, and hopefully you can fill them in with, get on the same page with that person. So, so that you and them are understanding together, okay, this is what I'm expecting. And you're saying, okay, this is what you're expecting. And those two match up. Okay. But for us, we don't have the luxury of asking those questions to somebody else because I am also the owner. Therefore, I will answer the questions. So I'll ask them and answer them all at once. So let's talk through our application. Web portal. What type of web portal? Well, we're going to choose to do ASP.NET Core Razor Pages. That's the type of application we want for our web portal. We're not going to do Web API. We're not going to do MVC. We're not going to do .NET Framework anything. This is all .NET Core and beyond. Okay? That's the web portal. Allow guests to book rooms. So things for the future version, authenticate guests. Forgot the H there. we're not going to have authentication in our main version. That means the guest will say, I am Tim Corey, and here's the rooms and information on my book. They're not going to say, okay, here's my login credentials, which means that in theory, I could say I am Sue Storm and book a room. Yes, for the minimum viable product, that's okay. It's just to get something in place, because you know what? For some things, you may find that that's not a big deal. It's not a detriment to your application, and authentication kind of is, because authentication is a pain. So maybe that's fine for some applications. We're going to find out. We'll probably add authentication to a future version, which will also allow for guest history. Okay, the idea that you know that I've booked a room 5 times, or booked a room in your hotel 5 times. So that's not going to be now. That's going to be later. This is going to be an ASP.NET Core Razor page, and we're going to say we're going to have one page, and that page will be for searching for a room. Okay, so let's talk assumptions here on this page. What goes on that page? Well, we're going to assume that the user is going to put in their date range. So start date, end date. And that brings up the next assumption, and that is we only have one hotel. Because if we had more than one hotel, we have to somehow indicate which hotel we're searching for. So the assumptions, or let's come down here and we'll create another list. Let's just call them assumptions. And really these are assumptions that were confirmed. All right, and one hotel only. All right, that's one of our assumptions. So we have one hotel, therefore we don't need to specify which hotel. We have a start date and end date. Now, just in case you're kind of wondering or freaking out, well, Marriott has hundreds and hundreds of hotels. Yeah, they do, but when you're talking about if you go to a specific hotel's website, you go to a book, you don't have to specify which hotel you're at. You're already on that hotel's website. Therefore, that assumption is this hotel, therefore one hotel only. The Marriott.com, where you can search all the hotels, that's an add-on on top of this type of system. That's maybe for later. And so maybe things for a future version, multiple hotel capability. We can add that to the list of things to think about for a future version. These are not guarantees. These are not promises. These are just, hey, we thought about this. It doesn't fit for the MVP. Therefore, we'll put it on a future versions list. We can talk about it then. Because remember, a future version is most heavily affected by what the users need. So if the users are saying, don't really care about multiple hotels, we care about authentications, we have our own account. Well, then that's what we focus on, not on multiple hotel capability. At least for the first upgrade, so 1.1 or the 2.0 version. All right, so back over here, we have one page that's for searching a room. You put in a start date and the end date, and it's going to somehow display a list of available hotel rooms. Hotel room types. Okay, the assumption is that guests book a hotel room type, not a specific room. Now, if you were running a bed and breakfast and you had, or if you had even a hotel that had themed rooms, okay, so the jungle room, the desert room, the Antarctica room, okay, all those rooms, they would be things you'd probably want to book specifically. You'd say, I want to be in the jungle room. Okay, so that would be a specific booking. With us, we're going to assume, and that assumption has been confirmed, that guests book a hotel room type. So I want a room with 2 beds. I want a room with 1 bed. I want a suite. Okay, those are the types of rooms. And then the user doesn't know how many of those types we have or how many have been booked. All they know is I can or I cannot book this type of room for this date range. Okay, so displays a list of hotel room types that are available. Okay, and then user can choose one to book. Okay, we have another page, and that is book room. Takes room from search page and takes room for search page, okay? And then it's going to ask for guest info, probably just name. And then it's going to book upon submission. That's it. All right. So we have 2 pages total. One page is going to be search for a room. The other page is book that room. And that's it for the web side of things. That allows the guest to book a room, and we have to know what rooms are available because that's going to display a list of hotel room types that are available. So we've covered the requirements for the web portal. Now let's change this one page to web page because we're going to have WPF soon. And that's the next thing. So the next thing is going to be we need to have a desktop app. So I'm going to choose WPF core desktop app. All right. And we're going to have this do a couple of things. But first of all, our assumption. The assumption is that a hotel employee will check guests in. Okay. So what does our WPF application have? WPF screen or form page. Doesn't really matter what we call it. Well, we're going to have a search for user. Okay. So it will search by last name and use today's date. That way, because this is a check-in page. That's all it is. Therefore, you don't check in for tomorrow. You don't check in for yesterday. You check in for today. Therefore, it's going to search by last name and today's date. So this means we don't have to enter in a date. It's going to search by the date of today. Not a date, today's date. So they'll type in the last name and use a date, and it will display a list of matching reservations. And then we can have a button that checks in a guest. And so what does a check-in look like? Well, right now, the assumption is, and let's put this down in our assumptions category. I'm going to say it's confirmed because I'm going to agree with it. But the assumption is that check-in means we just mark that they are at the hotel. Now, what assumption do we still have? Well, there's assumption that they're going to check out at some point. We haven't figured out what to do there. We say the guest will check in via the desktop app, but that's all. We don't say what happens with check out. Do we allow them to check out, or we say that when the date hits, we assume they've checked out? Well, assumptions there probably aren't a good thing. And it does seem like it's pretty much a core piece of functionality to allow them to check out as well. But that might be something you add to the future version list, because it's technically not part of our MVP. Our MVP says just this information here. It says nothing about checking out. Now, it's a small thing, but I think we really need to add it to our things for the future. Allow guests to check out, probably, again, through the front desk or the hotel employee. But that way we know, okay, this person's checked out or this person is not yet checked out. Because that way you can do room service and have that room prepped for the next person coming through if we know that they have, in fact, left the room. So if they leave at the room at 8 a.m., then the cleaning service can come through and reset the room for the next person at 8 a.m. or 8:30 instead of waiting until, let's say, 2 p.m. to do that in preparation for the person who's coming at 3:30 in the afternoon. So there's some real benefit there, but that's not something we absolutely need to have. So therefore, it goes on a future version list. Even though it's a really nice feature to have, it's in a lot of ways really important, but it's not the minimum we need. It's just above minimum. So therefore, we're not going to include that. So our desktop app looks like we have one page or one screen. And that's going to allow guests to check in via the desktop app. We'll be able to look up a guest reservation by name or other piece of information. What is that by name or other piece of information? Well, that's kind of our expansion upon what they said. They just said, let a user check in. So we said name or other piece of information. We didn't know what type of information. Well, we've asked and we've specified that it's just by last name. But we should probably add that to our assumptions list that booking search is done by the video I talked about what's coming up, that we are going to do SQLite. It's a future version idea, and it's going to come out in our testing that that's what the users actually want. Now, the user probably in the hotel, not the guests, but the hotel. So you know what? We don't like to have a SQL server on site for every hotel. Instead, what we want to have is a really portable, easy to use database. Therefore, we want to have SQLite for some locations. But that's not an MVP item. The MVP item is to have one data storage location. Now, other assumptions. No API middle layer. Okay, we're not going to put an API in between these things. We're just going to have a direct connection between our front-end application and our database. Now, I say direct connection in our front end. I really preach against the idea of having your UI talk to your database. But what I mean is, we'll actually have a class library that talks to our database, and that will be a part of or connected to our WPF application and our Razor Pages web app. Okay? And one of the assumptions we haven't mentioned, but is an assumption that we're going to accept because of the fact that this is what this course is all about, and this even all my training is all about, and that is that we're going to use the latest .NET technologies. So we're not going to use Python, we're not going to use Java, we're not going to use Even .NET framework stuff, we're not going to do. We're going to do .NET Core, .NET Standard, the latest technology. So even we'll do a .NET Core 3.1 since that was just released. We'll be doing that for our technologies, not .NET Core 2.2. Okay, so we're going with everything the latest .NET technologies. Okay, so that's about it for the big picture stuff. This is our O step, the open up the requirements. We talked about the things that will go into this MVP, the things that are a future version, and also the assumptions we've had that were confirmed. All right, so the assumptions you have that aren't confirmed get thrown away. Okay, or you But you want to come through here and say, does it take in a start date and end date and display a list of hotel room types that are available? Because if not, you're not done. You're not ready for 1.0 yet because you haven't done what you said you're going to do. This is a checklist to make sure that you're ready to go. When I would teach in the classroom, I would give you a list like this and say, this is what it has to do. When I go to grade your application, what I would do is I would look through every one of these things and say, does your application do that? I don't care how pretty it is. I don't care how many other features it has. That's the checklist. If you do those things, cool, it works. I sign off on it. If it doesn't do those things, it doesn't matter what it does, it fails. Okay? That's how you need to look at your applications. Grade them based upon what you said you're going to do. If you're doing what you said you're going to do, then you are successful. All right, so that's it for the open up the requirements step of the planning process, step number 2 in the Wood framework. Let's move on to the next video where we'll talk about the next step, which is user interface design.